I might have 5 or 6 different contact points for a regulatory issue, and instead of there being some sort of helpful resource, it's just 5 or 6 different people coming at you. It's not a good environment to be running a business, keeping staff morale up, finding leadership who can handle all this stress. It's actually, you've got fleets of bureaucrats who are experienced and have lawyers behind them, and that just using an arsenal to pound away at you while you're trying to deliver services.
Honestly, just wanted to just hear a little bit about how you got into aged care in the first place, and just a little bit about your background, because I haven't met you before, Russell.
Sure.
And I've just seen, I think Danny and I talked just before some of your content. I noticed that you're involved in some type of movies and things like that. So I know you got a lot of interesting kind of things happening. Just like to know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So our aged care company is a private family company, which was originally purchased by my father in 1979 as a single home in Wellington Point, Brisbane. Back then it was a cottage industry, as you can imagine, and not governed by the same rules that we have today. But to give you an idea, he bought that home at the age of 29.
Wow.
He's a bit of an entrepreneur in his day. But in any case, so he ran that for a period of, a substantial period of time under the old framework. Then regulation came in the Howard government era, 97. And that sort of coincided with my own time frame of leaving. I studied a law degree, but did not become a practicing lawyer. I focused in industrial relations instead. And I worked in the government as an industrial relations practitioner and an ethics advisor, like staff discipline, all that sort of stuff, firing teachers. I worked in the education department. So my background is dealing with unions and enterprise bargaining, industrial relations, unfair dismissals, all that sort of employee relations stuff. But I became frustrated with the government system as a bit of a free thinker, I guess. It's quite constraining and influenced by politics. So I approached there was never any pressure from my father to join the family company, but I just figured it was my calling to do that in the end. And I joined in 2003. So I've been running the business for 20 years with him. But we have a lot of other interests in other than aged care. Our family is largely invested in commercial and residential real estate. It's more like a family office, I guess you can say, where we have a lot of investments and interests in things to diverse away from the risk of aged care. And I have been doing that in my own strategy over the last 5 years. I'm not building more aged care. It's too risky. So I actively put my capital in other places. But some of the investments that we've been involved in over the last 5 years is medicinal cannabis, movie making, technology startups in the holographic space, a lot of construction lending, small construction lending, private non-bank finance, private equity investments a lot, and then a lot of commercial and residential real estate expansion and investment, because that's really where our knowledge base is. My father, even though he's in his 70s, is still involved in, I guess, the investment decision side of the business, and that's in our DNA, I guess. You get a good feel for it, so you focus in that space.
Did you want to ask anything, Danny?
Oh yeah, Russell. Adam and I often talk about government regulation and how it can stifle progress and innovation, but it is something you need. Like, how do we strike a balance?
Aged care is tricky, having been a bureaucrat myself and knowing that where taxpayer funds are involved, you've got to have rules. Otherwise, things just get taken liberties. So I understand that, but I remember a term that came up early in my career in aged care, which really perfectly describes the aged care sector, which is Stalinist. Stalin's government had a rule regulation book for everything. Pay scales, the price of wheat, the price of bread, everyone's wages, but then at the end of the day, under communism, they pretend to pay you and we pretend to work.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where the rules are only worthwhile if they are actually facilitating an effective functional market. If they are actually interfering with an effective functional market, then it's actually just creating layers of inefficiency. And I've been to the Department of Health at Woden in Canberra, and none of those people deliver any aged care. So what are they doing? They're just a cost on the system. They're an overhead. It's just one of my frustrations in the sector is that you see a lot of waste, you see a lot of procedure, and you have to ask, is any of that adding value? And I do have a lot of interactions. I'm pretty active on Twitter or in LinkedIn or wherever, more so on Twitter, where you interact with a lot of activists or people who are aggrieved by the way the system has performed, the aged care system. And they talk about, Royal Commission titled neglect, and obviously the system's not working, and this is why we need regulation to protect people who are vulnerable. Agree with that to some extent, but the situation we've seen over the last, probably beyond my time in starting in 2003, even back further than that, probably back to the back of 96, 97, is that it's just they're just continually slapping Band-Aid or layer of wallpaper on layer of wallpaper on layer of wallpaper. And it creates this very convoluted system. I'm dealing at some regulatory issues at the moment, and just the way that they interplay is incoherent. There's no strategy to it. You end up having 5 or 6 different masters, and it is an extremely time-consuming and frustrating and stressful system to operate in if things start to go wrong. There's no practical intent to help. I might have 5 or 6 different contact points for a regulatory issue, and instead of there being some sort of helpful resource, it's just 5 or 6 different people coming at you. And it's not a good what's the word? It's not a good environment to be running a business, keeping staff morale up, finding leadership who can handle all this stress. It's actually, you've got fleets of bureaucrats who are experienced and have lawyers behind them, and that just using an arsenal to pound away at you while you're trying to deliver services.
What do you think the result of all this is going to be? So in your time, I think I could probably assume that the regulation and this kind of tightness has just tightened up and gotten more regulation. I've seen it happening. What's the end game? Where do we go from here?
I think there is a realization that these many redundant layers of regulation is not working. There is a realization there, but public servants and the political machinery is inherently conservative. They don't want to blow up a system and start again too willingly, because there's just so much risk of embarrassment. So the incremental approach, we just add an extra rule, and you've seen so many of these rules just come through in the Albanese government. I mean, the raft of reform over the last 2 years or 18 months, I guess it is, it's just mind-blowing, and providers are reeling. We're running at 100% utilization of our corporate knowledge or whatever, the administrative side of the business, and then you just pile a whole bunch of more work. Who pays for that? How's it getting done? The timeline just setting, and the threat of sanctions or other punitive measures. It is not a functional, positive way to be going about things. And in particular, given they know the financial viability limitations and the staffing, the chronic staffing under shortage, especially in registered nursing, to then tell you that you must achieve something when you know that it's actually impossible. It's insane. If I was to do that to my staff, they'd just quit. But aged care providers can't quit. Aged care providers can't strike. Aged care providers can't have a protected industrial action or work to rule or go to an industrial relations commissioner to get an arbitration, say the government's being unfair. We have none of those rights. We are dictated to by rules that if we do not comply, we are just effectively defunded or shut down. So we've been set impossible missions or unrealistic missions, and that is very detrimental to staff morale, to be told that you must do something which is impossible. And they're just thinking about how they can care for individual people that they are actually personally affectionate toward. You know, they form personal interrelation bonds with these people, but we're doing it, you know, the executives, the capital owners, the whether you're not for profit or private or whatever, they're the ones that are having to assess the global risks that and how they apply to the business instead, while the carers just want to get the job done.
Is there any possibility of a Milton Friedman sort of free market? Can that open up in the sector? Is that even possible?
I don't think that's ever going to happen. Getting back to my original point about the obligation of governments to protect taxpayer money, this is a sector that is substantially funded by the taxpayer. 70% or so is taxpayer funded, although, you know, the current aged care task force is re-examining that relationship. But whilst there's a substantial amount of taxpayer funding, whether it be childcare, whether it be NDIS, whether it be aged care, these are sections that the government and the voters will expect to have some sort of government regulation around. And I do know that there are privately funded aged care. Any aged care provider can run a private aged care home and not draw government subsidy. That does exist. But obviously you've got to find consumers who have that appetite to spend that much of their own money. So there is a role for regulation. It just needs to be the right level.
It seems so much of the regulations is arbitrary and sort of based on non-practical modelling, and it just seems to be there for its own sake and grow.
I think the best example of that is the mandatory minutes with RN, the RN mandatory minutes. Now, the whole mandatory staffing issue has been around for as long as I've been in the business, because it exists in hospitals, and then probably about 10 years ago it was brought into childcare, where there was mandated ratios in childcare for their national quality framework, I think it's called, because I did used to be a childcare provider as well, about 10 years ago. But so it's not unrealistic to expect some sort of staffing mandate to exist in aged care. But the thing is that with the registered nursing aspect in particular, it's actually driving counterproductive outcomes, because what we had is that, to give you an example, you know, in our homes, we might have run a framework of something like 15 or 20 minutes of RN, and then an additional component of ENs, similarly maybe another 20 minutes of ENs. And so you are getting, in terms of a registered workforce, which combines both RN and EN, you are getting 40 minutes. But they are both levels of worker who have the qualifications commensurate with the work that they're being asked to do. And so, you know, you're fitting workers to the demands. Whereas now you're just, once again, using your word arbitrary, they've just created this arbitrary number of 40 minutes of RNs. And so you can't get 40 minutes of RNs. Well, not the sector globally. Individual homes may be achieving it, but they're doing it at the expense of a different home, or they're overbidding and paying uncommercial, unsustainable rates for it. And two, you're employing RNs to do work that not necessarily should sit with RNs. And then thirdly, what happens to all the ENs? They go on the breadline because they haven't got jobs anymore. And, you know, I've written multiple times to the minister during the implementation of the period and the lead up, and they will reply with statements like, ENs still have a valuable role in the aged care workforce. I agree they do, but the way the arbitrary staffing structure is modelled is that a provider who does not achieve 40 minutes of RN labour is essentially non-compliant. So by financial imperative, they have to cut their EN minutes to achieve the RN minutes, because you're not going to duplicate. You're not going to put on 40 RN minutes and then employ ENs as well. That would be insane. So you know, that's essentially, this is the kind of double think that the government engages in at times. You know, that they want you to do two things simultaneously, which would result in enormous waste.
Would you say that policy's probably been the most disruptive to you, Russell? Like in terms of the changes, like the recent changes? Because I know like when we talk about changes, there's been the national quality indicators and the funding and then the minutes and so on and so on. So I'm just wondering, that one I'm hearing a lot of people have had a lot to say about that. You know, I don't think the aged care industry is always boisterous. They're usually quite reserved in being critical of policy in the government, but I'm hearing a lot of blowback from that one.
Yeah, I would say of the reforms, that is the biggest. I guess the whole charade around pay rates was a bit a problem as well. You've got a government saying it supports pay increases, but it wants to go through this charade of a Fair Work Commission process where if they wanted to, they could just with the stroke of a pen declare the new rates. But instead it was this year-long quasi-judicial Fair Work Commission with witnesses and barristers, and, you know, it's what a total waste. You know, if you've already made your mind up, you're going to increase rates by 15%, just do it. Right? They're the ones with the money. So I was quite annoyed by that. You know, having come from that sector, I know that the industrial relations system is this sort of witchcraft industry that everyone wants to make it seem mystical and hard to understand. It's intentionally obscure and complex like that to make it inaccessible to everyone else. But, you know, in terms of something as simple as I'm fulfilling election promise, I promised to increase wages by 20%. No, actually, now it's 15, sorry. Yeah, if you're going to do 15, just do it. You know, like just the way that they declare ANAC rates. You declare ANAC rates by issuing a ministerial determination. If you wanted to declare a different rate or a 50% increase to provider funding, then it must be passed on through an increase to the award schedules, and they could easily do that. So that was annoying. But then, yeah, the RN mandate one, the big thing for me is that because everyone already knew the RNs just were not there, so what is the point? And then two, it forced us to disrupt an existing workforce system that was working. Now, the retort I do get with some interactions is that, well, it wasn't working because otherwise why'd you have a Royal Commission called neglect? But I really think the Royal Commission on neglect was more around a poor culture and attitude towards the treatment of aging. And, you know, resourcing may be an issue, but I've posted probably 1,000 times in my profiles that the resourcing, the finding of the Royal Commission was that successive governments have ripped out 9.8 billion per annum from the aged care sector. Right, that was the actual finding of the commission after they looked at the way the governments over the last 30 years had done sneaky indexation tricks where you're indexing less than inflation every year, then you have a little cut here, or you reorganise the funding structure from RCS to ACFI, and then they change the ACFI around. Like, every little trick ends up having providers in a net worse off position. And even in the most recent funding restructure with ANAC and then with the 15% increase, each of those changes has resulted in providers being worse off. But the government will use media releases saying, umpteen more billion invested in aged care. That funding went in my left pocket and now my right pocket, straight to workers, or straight to higher minutes, straight to higher rates, straight to administration and reporting expenses. There wasn't actually any relative improvement in the provider's position to keep them viable and delivering services.
It's both unnerving to hear this. It's families and people like yourself that we need in aged care. And I know, you know, I know that you guys will be in it because of your respect for the elderly. And, you know, I know you guys are more than just business people. So, yeah, it unnerves me to think that there can't be a viable option to provide care and look after the elderly that have given us, you know, what a country to be handed on to us. So yeah, I wonder what is it that can keep people like yourself in this industry and providing care. And yeah, what do we change? What do we do to make everything we've discussed different? And I also thank you for being so honest, because I work in the industry and there's things that I'm learning off you. So I think if we can spread this information out there, then we can at least make some awareness of it. So I also thank you for coming on and talking to us.
No, I'm always happy to talk. It's no problem. I enjoy it. I will leave you with a bit of feedback about how it could look. I was at a large client lunch for a bake a couple of weeks back, and the majority of the room were retirement village providers or lend-lease providers, people who are not in residential care. And some of them do have approved provider offshoots. They might have a small adjoining residential care service. But I do see that the market will fragment further in terms of more people want to live at home in a private residential dwelling of some sort. So I think that segment of the industry is going to keep growing. And the thing that I constantly heard is they talk about how great it is to be a retirement village operator because they got none of the headaches of aged care. And then once someone becomes aged care level, they just say, it's time to go, right? Once the home care package, once a person moves into 24-hour dependency or they have dementia behaviours which cannot be managed privately, they need to become in 24-hour residential aged care. So I think the government really needs to understand that you're going to have these two tugging dynamics of, on a per capita basis, falling demand for aged care. I'm not saying globally demand will fall, but on a per capita basis, aged care stays will become even shorter. They'll become more acute, and that means providers will need more intensive resourcing to deal with very high frailty level quasi-hospital style care services. And in particular, a thing that we're really dealing a lot with in my own organisation of 2 homes is very high behaviours dementia residents that are almost, if they were not an elderly person, they could be in some sort of institutional setting. They've got certain psychiatric behaviours that are not compatible with residential care living. So, the government really needs to think about how are they going to cater for these very high care needs that they want providers to be capable of delivering in terms of a funding model, a resourcing model, and a legal framework to facilitate that. Because at the moment, with the security of tenure thing, security of tenure means that providers cannot unilaterally terminate a care agreement. The only way they can do that is under certain strict rules. With that security of tenure cloud over a provider's responsibility, they're very cautious about vetting the residents that they accept, because essentially there is a big stick there waiting for you if you say this person just cannot live here anymore. And you can't have such a adversarial relationship there. It's got to be more of, well, the government has a role in taking care of those that are beyond the privately funded or not privately funded, but these private provider mechanisms. There's got to be a point where the government steps in and says, how are we going to deploy the health system as a whole to care for certain individuals that, are not fitting in? So, I just see that divergence between people wanting to live longer in private homes, private dwellings, which is, I completely get that, and utilizing the explosion in home care, it's extremely popular. But then at the end of the line, there is this continuing need for residential aged care, but it needs to be resourced to have a legal framework which allows it to operate effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, I hope the industry can keep people like you, and I hope the government starts listening to people like you. You should be the people they're going to and making decisions, because you're an expert in the industry, and we could tell, just the conversation straight away. It's just, I could listen to you talk about it because it's just information from the coalface and it's all gold. People don't talk like this that often out there to me. So thank you again.
I like your use of the term Stalinist too, because everything seems to be going that way across the board, even conservative.
I guess the more polite term to use in exchange for it is prescriptive. Right, and a prescriptive system is a system that has a rule for everything. And that's aged care. Right, there's not anything really left to getting back to what you talked about before, innovation. You can't innovate when everything is prescriptive.
It's just so top down.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before Russell came on, right?
Yeah.
Exactly that, yeah. If everything's dictated, then there's no place to add your own flavours to what you're doing. And
No.
and they want it to be consumer
No way to
based.
differentiate, no way to create a brand profile, because everyone's got a, in terms of the way care, like there's this thing called the schedule of specified care and services. And so that is what a provider must do to collect their subsidy. But in terms of the care side of it, it's everyone must do the same, right? Otherwise you're not delivering the care. In terms of the hotel and accommodation side of it, sure, there's differentiation of room sizes, room qualities, the hotel extras that people do, and there's this whole additional services fee framework now that providers provide different level of additional hotel and, living environmental services and charge, varying rates for it. But in terms of the care, it's fixed. So you can't get better or worse care. You just have to get the care.
Yeah. That's why communism doesn't work. There's no one size fits all, and price controls don't work. There's always an unintended consequence.
Well, and it's bearing out right now. But I guess the government don't want to admit.
Yeah. I wonder if there's going to be a pushback, because you can see like in Argentina and Holland and different places, there's a shift.
I just think that there is not any sort of effective mechanism for that pushback to be facilitated. Like, it's the aged care sector is just a sea of individual families trying to make their way around. There's no coherent. I mean, you have CODA and other activist groups, but it's just not a groundswell like a union movement or the pensioner movement, or it's not something the media really gets their teeth in. They get into it from time to time, but they're really getting into it more from the point of view of, highlighting the failings of individual providers. They're not looking at the policy failure.
All right. Well, thanks heaps.
Such good content.
And,
thank you very much, guys.
Have a good day, Russell.
And I love the QPS benchmarking product. I've been using it for years.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
And if there's anything you see to improve, make sure you let me know, because we're always trying to do better as well.
I gave a few sort of feedbacks early on, but it's in a pretty good space now, I think.
Yeah, we're building as much as we can. So that, the boys are all building all improvements to it. So we're pretty flat out, but always happy to listen to ideas. And it was, like I said, awesome to talk to you. I just kind of bit beside myself that we managed to do it. So
yeah,
thank you. Have a great day.
Good stuff, guys. See you later.
See ya.